Workers' Party Chief Singhs said he'll give more details on his party's approach in Parliament in the coming term when the House reopens on August 24th. He also indicated yesterday that he would extend his support to the two non-constituency MPs from the Progress Singapore Party, given the staff and resources he'll have.
There's been much interest in the resources Mr. Singh will be accorded as Singapore's first leader of the opposition. His new duties include leading and organising scrutiny of the government's positions and actions, as well as leading the opposition in presenting alternative views during debates on policies.
He'll also be consulted on the appointment of opposition MPs to select committees and may sometimes be asked to attend official state functions and meetings.
To ensure he can fulfill this role, Mr. Singh will be accorded certain privileges like the right of first response among MPs and a longer speaking duration for speeches equivalent to that given to political office holders. He'll also get briefings on issues of national interest on top of government data and information available to other MPs.
Mr. Singh will also receive double the allowance of an elected MP, making his annual package $385,000. He will also get an allowance to hire up to 3 legislative assistants and will be provided with a secretary.
Well, let's take this discussion further with Eugene Tan, Associate Professor of Law at Singapore Management University. Prof Tan, out of Mr. Singh's new duties as opposition leader, which do you think is the most significant in the governance of Singapore?
Well, Olivia, I think when you look at the duties, they are not really new duties. But I think, on the point of which is the most significant, I think in my view, that would be leading the opposition in presenting alternative views on policies, proposed laws, and debates on key issues, such as debates on motions. I say it is the most significant because it will go beyond what the opposition is most well known for in today's context, which is really asking questions, pushing the government to respond to certain public concerns. But this ability, to present alternative views, will certainly demonstrate what the opposition is capable of. It will also certainly contribute to policy making. But it is also clear that Mr. Singh and the opposition at this point in time will rather focus on the other duties. I think there is a sense, looking at their statements so far, that because of the resource gap, here we're talking about 12 MPs and 4 legislative assistants, compared with the government having the entire bureaucracy behind them, as well as the access to the information, that the opposition is certainly not going to jump into the mold that the PAP government would want it to be in. So I think here, we are really seeing in the course of the new 14th Parliament, that contestation over what the leader of opposition should do, what is the role of the opposition in today's context. These are issues that I think we will see underlining, many of the discussions in Parliament.
Now, Professor, 10 elected MPs from the Workers' Party plus 2 more NCMPs from the Progress Singapore Party. Do you think the LO position will drastically change the opposition's role?
Not at all. I think the leader of the opposition's office, as it currently is, will not drastically change the opposition's role. I think perspective is important here. We are looking at the opposition holding no more than 11% of the elected seats. There is the very great gap in terms of resources that they can mobilize. But certainly, the opposition's role through the leader of the opposition office will be institutionalized. And I think that's an important and timely development because it recognizes the role that the opposition plays in our system of parliamentary checks and balances. But more than that, it also seeks to socialize the opposition into the role that they would play as a responsible, credible, and loyal opposition. But in many ways, when you look at the opposition's role in the course of this leader of the opposition's office, I think it's very much seeks to prepare Singapore for the day in which we do evolve into a two-party or a multi-party system. So I think in that sense, much as the role will not change in the short term, I see this as a way station in the journey towards the opposition becoming capable of being the government in waiting.
Right. Well, let's focus on, the current, on the first opposition leader, Mr. Pritam Singh, of course. Now, he said he'll donate half of his LO salary, which is about $96,000 before tax, to several purposes, including the WP Community Fund and Grassroots Committee. Mr. Singh's Facebook post drew more than 400 positive comments from netizens. Prof. Tan, what do you think Mr. Singh's act signals?
Well, I think here it signals, the intention of Mr. Pritam Singh, as the first leader of opposition, to use that office and mold it as one which is for the ultimate benefit of Singapore and Singaporeans. So even though the office really is a privilege that he has, a privilege that is earned, but I think he sees that, there is the opportunity to ensure that it is being used for the greater purpose. And I think it's quite clear that the generosity has not gone unnoticed. But I think it's also perhaps an indirect reference to the very controversial issue of ministerial salaries, which is always a hot button issue. But I think it's also important to recognize that MPs are free to decide how they want to use their parliamentary allowances. But again, to each his own. But certainly Mr. Singh's gesture, has gone down very well.
Great insights as always, Prof. Tan. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We've been speaking to Associate Professor of Law Eugene Tan from SMU.